Welcome to the first episode of the Pro side of Live2D Beginner vs Pro. In this episode, we'll be expanding upon the beginner face rigging, making our face much more expressive. Let's start off by making our eyes follow our brow forms. Naturally, when we raise our brows, our eyelids follow, widening our eyes. And when we furrow our brows, our eyelids lower to narrow our eyes. We can actually replicate this look in Live2D. Before that, however, I need to introduce you to a blend shape. Blend shapes are a type of parameter in Live2D that are going to be extremely useful to us in the Pro track of this series. Ordinarily, we would try to avoid assigning keyforms to 3 or more parameters for each part. This is because each keyform will start interacting with each other, and it will get more and more complicated to set up with each keyform combination. By using a blend shape parameter, we can get around this issue, as the blend shape will automatically interact with any other keyforms created on that part. Here's an example of how a blend shape works. If we alter the shape of our iris on this blend shape keyform, and then try our XY keyforms, you'll see that it's maintaining the new shape without any extra effort. Without using a blend shape parameter, it will lose its new shape when we adjust the XY, unless we adjust it for each and every keyform. There are other benefits to blend shapes, which I'll cover later. So, what we're going to need to do first is delete the current keyforms we have for our brow forms. So now these parameters should be empty. Now, if we right-click the parameter and select Edit Parameter, we should see this menu. All we need to do is select the option Blend Shape and click OK. Repeat with the other side, and these are now both blend shape parameters. Let's quickly redo our brow forms on these parameters. And now we're basically back where we started. But by making these blend shapes, we can do so much more with these parameters. Alright, now we can rig our new eye shapes. Let's select our eye top and eyelash right and create 3 keyforms on our brow right blend shape parameter. Set the brow form to 1 and we'll use the temporary path deformation tool to adjust our eyelid upward. This is very customizable to your model, so don't worry about following this exact shape. For example, if you have a more cartoonish model, you might want to push the eye shapes even further. Or, for a more realistic style, it might be a little more subtle. Once we're happy with the top eyelid, we also need to adjust the eye white to stay within the eyelid. We also want to adjust our lower eyelid to widen the eye further. Make sure to add 3 keyforms to brow form right, and adjust the eye bottom down, as well as the eye white. One last thing to do with this shape is to adjust our eyelid part here. As you can see, our eye widening is covering it up and it should follow the shape of our eye. Add a deform path and keyforms for brow form right, and deform this up till it follows the same curve as our eye. Now our eyes should widen as we raise our brows. Next, we will need to set up our brow form at -1. Select our eye top and eyelash right again, and we'll use the temporary path deformation tool to deform our eyelid downward this time. Much like our eye widen shape, this can be customized to your model, but in general, we want the shape of our eyelid to follow the shape of our brow. Once we're happy with the top eyelid, we also need to adjust our eye white again, as well as making sure our eyelid part is following our main eye too. We don't need to adjust the bottom eyelid for this shape. However, there is the option to raise the bottom eyelid in order to narrow the eye further, if you want to exaggerate the eye shape even more. Now, if we test our brow form, you'll see that our eye is following the shape of the brow. We aren't finished with our brow form yet though. You may notice that when our eye is closed and we try to adjust our brow form, it's making our closed eye deform weirdly. Here's where the other benefit of blend shapes comes in, limiting blend shape weight. Basically, we can stop the blend shape from deforming our eye only when it's closed. Let me show you how this works. First, we want to select the parts we want to set the limit on, so all of our eye parts that have keyforms on brow form right. Make sure to not have the brow itself selected, as we want this to always be active. I also like to leave this eyelid part, as it would still follow the brow even though our eye is closed. Now, with our parts selected, we want to open up our parameter menu and find Limit Settings for Blend Shape Weights. This will bring up this window. Select the blend shape we want to adjust here. If you have multiple blend shapes assigned to a single part, then there'll be more options on this drop-down menu. Next, we can select the parameter we want to adjust the weight for here. Find Eye Right Open, select it, and click Add. Now, take a look at our weight limit graph on the right. This shows us how effective the blend shape is on the parameter we've selected. Right now, our blend shape is 100% effective all of the time on Eye Open. But we want this to be 0% effective when our eye is closed, or when Eye Open parameter is at 0. The easiest way to do this is to change the preset here to line 2. And now if we look at the graph, it shows us that the blend shape is 0% effective when Eye Open is at 0. And we can test that right now. Our eye closed no longer deforms weirdly. A few more things to note before we move on from this menu. If you take a look at all of the line presets, you'll see just how much you can customize blend shapes in Live2D. Not only that, but you can limit the weight of a single blend shape across multiple parameters. You can also set custom weight percentages by clicking Edit Graph here, just in case the presets don't cover what effect you're trying to go for on a parameter. For our eye shape here, you may also want to use the Fold Line 4 preset. You want the eye shapes to remain a bit more exaggerated till it's basically fully closed. I highly recommend learning to utilize blend shapes if you're looking to improve your Live2D skills. Now, we'll need to reflect our eye over again now that we've added to it. Once we've got it into position and start moving our keyforms from our right to left parameters, you'll likely get a pop-up asking to transfer blend shape weights over too. Make sure to select Yes here, as this will change the parameter we assign the custom weight limits to for us automatically, from Eye Open right to left. Now, both eyes should be working correctly, but if you've missed a weight transfer, simply go back into the Limit Settings menu and adjust it to the correct parameter accordingly. Our eyes currently look very flat as we move our eyeballs around the sclera. Our eyeballs should have depth to them, as they're meant to be spherical. Let's select our pupil right and iris right together, and we'll start with our eyeball X. What we want to do is use our deform brush to push the center of our iris back towards the middle of our eye. Make sure that your deform brush isn't set too large, where it starts to deform the outer lines of the iris. We want to only be deforming the middle of the textures. Make sure to not use reflect motion here, as it doesn't work effectively when working with art mesh. We need to adjust both keyforms manually. The setup for eyeball Y is basically the same. We need to deform this down when we look up, and up when we look down. Once we're done, we just need to synthesize our corners, and now our eyes should look like they have much more depth to them. One more thing to make our eyes feel much more lively during tracking. Select all of our eye parts that are currently rigged on Eye Open right, so basically our eye white and eyelids. Make a new deformer and call this Eyelid Right XY. We're going to add 2 keyforms on Eye Open right and 3 keyforms on Eyeball X and Eyeball Y. It's very important to add the 2 keyforms on Eye Open right before rigging this part, as we only want this movement to occur when our eye is open. Now, to rig our eyeball X, we'll use the deform brush to shift our eyelids towards the gaze direction, so right at 1 and left at -1. Similarly, for eyeball Y, we shift this upward at 1 and downward at -1. Synthesize our corners and test the new eye shapes. We don't want these movements to be too extreme, or your eyes might look more like jelly as you look around. So make sure to adjust it till you're happy with it. Make sure to repeat this process with your left eye, or reflect over the entire eye if you would prefer. I personally like to just adjust both of the eyes at the same time by selecting both art meshes or deformers, and comparing the shapes as you create them. Let's move on to our mouth. We can talk, smile, and frown, but that's just about it, right? Well, there's a few more things we can do to improve our mouth rigging. I won't be covering V-bridger rigging here, only techniques that can be used with any tracking type for VTuber models. We're going to start off with mouth X. This will replicate how we move our mouth, left and right. First, we need to create a new parameter in our mouth folder. Call this mouth X with a minimum of -1, default 0, and maximum of 1. And make sure to select blend shape. Mouth X doesn't necessarily need to be rigged on a blend shape. However, it will make our rigging much easier later on. Now, we select our inner mouth, upper lip, and lower lip. And then create a new warp deformer, also called mouth X. We may need to adjust the size of this deformer by holding Ctrl and dragging the side of the box. So our mouth line should be in the center. Make 3 keyforms on mouth X with our new deformer and set this to 1. We don't want our mouth to move horizontally like this. Rather, our mouth should deform a little upwards as it moves to the side. We can achieve this by moving the center of our deformer diagonally and adjusting the sides back towards the chin. I recommend checking all of the mouth forms as we rig mouth X too, just to make sure that it looks good as we talk. Once we're happy with the right side, we can reflect the motion to set up the left side for us. We will also apply extended interpolation to our mouth X parameter. We can find this in the parameter menu. Select ellipse interpolation in the drop-down menu, and change the interpolation adjustment to 3. This will help to smooth out the movement of our mouth as it arcs, by adding additional points that follow a circle rather than being linear. Before we move on from mouth X though, there's one more thing I'd like to add to this parameter. Select both sides of our eye bottom and eye white, and create 3 keyforms on mouth X. Let's start with our right side. Set mouth X to -1, and what we're going to do is deform our lower eye upward as if it was following our mouth moving towards it. Make sure to adjust the eye white with it. We'll repeat this with the left side when mouth X is at 1. And now, much like with our brow forms, we need to limit the weight of our blend shapes for our eye parts, using the Line 2 preset for eye open right and eye open left. I recommend testing the mouth X shapes with the eye smile active. If you find that the lower eye is deforming too much, then you can always turn down the blend shape weight for eye smile down to around about 50%, or about wherever you're happy with the look of the eye shapes. Our mouth is now rigged, but the face overall feels too static. When we open our mouth, our jaw should follow. We'll need to create a mesh for our face line and color first. The most important thing to remember when creating this mesh is to make sure that we have a dense mesh around the outline of the face. And for the inner texture, it's generally a flat color, so we only need a light mesh here. We can mesh both parts together, or copy and paste the mesh between parts to make sure that the mesh is identical. It's very important to make sure the face line and color have the exact same mesh, otherwise it will cause deformation issues later on. Create a new deformer for our face color and line, and call this face jaw. We also need to increase the number of conversion divisions to around about 8 width and height, so we have more control over the deformation of this warp deformer. Create 2 keyforms on mouth open with our face jaw deformer, and set this to 1. Since we only want the lower part of the face to move, we will first change the Bezier division number for height to 3. This will add an extra control point here. Now we can pull down the deformer here, and it will only deform from our cheeks. We want our jaw to follow our mouth opening. Make sure to check the distance from our lip to our chin when our mouth is closed and open. We don't want the jaw to extend too far down, otherwise it will look awkward when we talk. Once we're happy with the mouth open shape, we also need to create 3 keyforms on mouth form. We then need to adjust the jaw to our mouth forms. Basically, deform the jaw slightly upward for mouth smile and frown to follow our lower lip. Here's where making our mouth X a blend shape comes in handy though. Let's make 3 keyforms on mouth X with our face jaw deformer. When our mouth X is active, we want our jaw to follow slightly. So, we deform the chin diagonally like this. We also don't want this movement to be too extreme. Make sure to add extended interpolation to this too. And that's all we need to do with mouth X for now. There's another unique parameter that we can create for our face tracking, cheek puff. This is optional, but adding it can make the face overall more expressive. Create a new parameter called cheek puff with a minimum of 0, default of 0, and a maximum of 1. Make sure to make this a blend shape. Since we are using a blend shape parameter, we can reuse the face jaw deformer here. Create 2 keyforms on cheek puff and set this to 1. Now, we'll use the deform brush tool to push the cheeks outward like this, to make it look like we've filled our cheeks with air. We also want to make sure this looks okay with our mouth open and mouth X movements too. We also need our mouth to squish inward as our cheeks puff out. We can reuse our mouth X deformer for this. Create 2 keyforms on cheek puff, and at 1, all we need to do is make the deformer smaller horizontally. We can do this by holding Alt as we click and drag the red bounding box. Since we're squishing the mouth inward, we should also stretch the mouth vertically to compensate. Make sure to double check the open mouth shapes and adjust the skin layer if anything becomes visible below the chin. The last part we need to deform for cheek puff will be our lower eyes, as our cheeks will push this upward. Select our eye parts, except for our iris. Basically everything that is currently assigned to our eye open parameters. Making sure to keep the left and right separate. We need 2 new deformers here, eye puff left and eye puff right. Select both of these new deformers and create 2 keyforms on cheek puff. Now, we just need to push the lower part of the deformer upward on both. Try to keep both sides even, but don't worry too much about perfect symmetry. Make sure to test how the eyes moves when closed. If you don't want the eyes to shift upwards when the eye is closed, you can also add the Line 2 preset to limit the weight of the cheek puff, much like we did with our brow forms. Now, our face feels much more expressive and overall more lively. Let's quickly go over what we learnt in this episode. We learnt how to use blend shapes in Live2D, including their benefits, such as limiting their weights for specific parameters. We use those blend shapes to create unique eye shapes following our brow forms, creating a new mouth parameter for tracking, mouth X, and making adjustments to our jaw shape to better follow our mouth movements, as well as creating another new tracking parameter in cheek puff. We also added more depth to our eyes for a more convincing gaze direction. The next Pro episode will cover our hair physics, where we'll be building off the beginner episode once again by creating unique physics parameters for X and Y inputs, and utilizing blend shapes to improve our process. Thank you to my Ko-Fi members for supporting the channel, especially our super shiny treasures, Toxan. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out my Ko-Fi link in the description below. Take care and have fun in Live2D.